Welcome back, Fantasy Fiction Fanatics. It's great to see you again, and I hope you're doing well. Today's class, we are going to be starting Harrow the Ninth, which is the second book of the Locked Tomb series. So we are transitioning from book 1 to book 2 with the first 4 chapters. I stopped it at 4 chapters because with the prologue and the first 4 chapters, there is a lot to talk about. Definitely a lot to talk about with the start of this book. So I wanted to keep it a little bit shorter so that we can really talk in depth about what is going on and how we are transitioning from book 1 to this book 2. Let's just really quick before we get into it, go over our trivia. Thank you as always to everyone who participates every week in the trivia question. I always have a lot of fun seeing your answers, seeing who gets it right and who participates with me. It's a lot of fun, so thank you. The correct answer for this week was hills and mountains, though I did also accept underground since dwarves do live underground and they have their mountains or their hills. They usually dig deeper underground, so I figured that counted as well. And so congratulations to both Paul and Dan who got the question correct. Thanks again to everybody else who participated and gave it their best guess. If you would also like to participate in the trivia question, we'd be happy to have you join us. It is on the blog fantasyfictionfanatics.net. If you head over there, you can scroll down just a little bit on desktop and it will be on the right hand side. The question will be there for you to answer and to see the previous answers, the previous week's answer and who got it right. So yeah, you'll just scroll down just a little bit on the desktop version and it'll be right there. If you are on mobile, you will have to scroll almost all the way down, not quite all the way, but scroll most of the way down and you will see it down there and we'll be able to answer. So as always, if you'd like to participate in the question, we would love, love, love to have you join us and to participate, and you can see if you get it right as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right in with today's class because, like I said, we do have quite a bit going on at the start of this book. So let's start with our recap and get going. In the prologue, from the very, very beginning, we see that he and the authors to protect Harrow and that she can undo whatever has been done to Harrow, which we don't know any idea what that's about. But she does provide or say that she can provide this help with Harrow, and Harrow says no. And then we move forward where Harrow has a memory of Ortis being Harrow's cavalier instead of Gideon, and there's this whole scene with her convincing him to become her cavalier. So then the body, capital B body, tells her that that is not how it happens at the end of that little scene. And then we start with Harrow having trouble now that she is a lector, so this is at the beginning of chapter 1, and she is constantly sick and throwing up in, it looks like a hospital or like a military type hospital. We're not really sure where she's at or why she's there at this moment. We just know that she's being constantly sick, constantly having problems, and there is the sense that she is in some kind of hospital room. The Emperor then comes to visit her and takes her to show her the 500 people he has, I guess in stasis of some kind, that he is going to send to the Ninth in order to restore her house. So that is his plan. He's going to send them all and have that be his promise to her, apparently, that he is going to restore her ninth house. And then she passes out at the end of that. And we have a whole chapter that is just a narrative about her past, how she grew up, her parents' suicide, after she discovers what's in the locked tomb, all that kind of stuff. It kind of goes through a little bit of her childhood and how she grew up. And then she ends up waking up after this section. And Ianthe is there visiting her at her sickbed and gives her a letter. Now, this letter is one that she reads and finds that it is written by herself, that she has not any memory of writing this letter, but it is in her handwriting, in her own cryptic message way of writing. So she reads it, and after she's done, she swears her loyalty to Ianthe again, like the letter told her to. And that's kind of where we left off, is right after her swearing her allegiance, and that little bit of a couple of moments after that. Now, I'm sorry, like, reading this, the recap notes that I had for myself is a little bit more jarring than normal, and that's partly because that is how the beginning of this story is. It's all over the place. It's very confusing. It doesn't make much sense. So the recap for me was hard to kind of pinpoint what I should mention as like the main things for it. So sorry if it was a little all over the place. It's partly because as you've read, the beginning is all over the place. So it's kind of hard to be like, okay, well, what happens in these first sections? So let's go ahead and talk about this book and starting this book. Specifically, starting it where we are at with the beginning of it, as well as the structure of the book. So as we've, dealt with before, many books do have, like section breaks. They are structured more than just starting with chapter 1 and going through the sections. We've got different acts in this one, but there's different breaks that are different ways for other books, like Dragonlance had the book 1 in book 1, book 2 in book 1, that kind of section. Belgariad also has the different sections, and that are based on like locations that are considered parts in the book breakdown. So this one has that as well, just like the first one did. The first one had different acts, and so does this one. So we are actually separating a chunk of chapters as a different section from other chapters. So however the author wants to break up her story or to group events that happen in her story together are separated by acts. So we are in the first act, and we are going to find out what the significant part of grouping this is as we go along. We do have the same pattern on there that has the different skulls, and we do have the different skulls on the chapters. So every chapter break you have a skull with a number on it. Mostly it's been 9 at this point, but we did see a little bit of a change in that later on when we got toward chapter 4. So basic same structure as the first book. Seems like we are continuing with that same basic design for the chapter breaks and for those act breaks, and we will see how that influences our reading as we move forward. So that's how it is similar to book 1, but we do have some differences from book 1 in the structure and in starting this book. We now have different markers related to the Emperor's murder. So we have the first prologue that says it's the day before the Emperor is murdered. And then we have the Paratus, or whatever it was called. I would have to look up exactly what that word was, which is right after the prologue, which was 14 months before the Emperor was killed. And so we have these different markers of when events are happening compared to an event that we don't know about yet, the murder of the Emperor. So we actually haven't visited the Emperor's murder, like we don't know how that happens. We haven't seen that yet. But we do have these markers of like, this is where this happens in comparison to this event that I'm assuming we're going to be working toward. That's what it seems like, is that we started right before it happened, and then we're going back in time and we're going to work our way up to the events that led to that event. So possibly it is a foreshadowing moment for us. We'll see exactly why she has set it up that way as we continue forward. The other thing is that I've noticed that there's no real glossary in this book. I looked and I didn't see one. Please let me know if I missed it. Especially since I have the Kindle version, I don't have a flip-through version, but it didn't have any markers, and I looked through at the end, I didn't see it. So that is different in the fact that, the author is then assuming that you have the knowledge that you need in order to read this book without any extra glossary or any extra explanations. And then we also have, with starting at this book, so we've got our structure stuff, that's kind of more of our structure stuff, but then with starting it, we are not directly after the events of book 1. So obviously we understand that it's not too far in the future from the events from book 1, but obviously time has passed in the fact that there is a gap between what Haru remembers happening and where she's at now. So she remembers that she had that conversation that we had at the epilogue in the last one, which was her conversation with the Emperor after she woke up being a lector. But then she doesn't remember writing any of these letters. She doesn't know anything that's happened with her deal with Ianthe or anything like that. So there has been some time. We don't know exactly how much time. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of time, but there is a space of time between what happened in that epilogue and where Haru is at right now. So we do have a gap of time that we don't have any clue as to what happened to Haru or what's going on. So Haru doesn't remember much about that time. She doesn't remember really anything at all from that time. And you get the feeling that she feels like she basically just woke up as a lector, that she's not really had that gap of time until she reads those letters and understands that something did happen since she talked to the Emperor, which she doesn't even totally remember exactly what she said to the Emperor at that time, other than agreeing to be a lector for him for a set amount of time and making a deal that he would make the ninth house a better house again, to regrow it. So pretty interesting start, pretty interesting structure. We're seeing that we're not quite touching where we were. We have this space of time which is meant to be skipped for us as well as for Haru, because that leads to the mystery that we have of what's going on and where she's at right now. Now, the next thing I really want to talk about for this is the point of view. So book 1, we had typical third-person point of view following, or it was limited in the fact that we followed Gideon around. So it was third-person limited, with Gideon being the main character. This point of view is mostly, other than one little section that we had, second person, with Haru being the character defined as you. And I have never actually read a book before that was written in second person. It is a very, very, very unique point of view that is hardly ever used. So this is my first experience with second person. And at first, it definitely made it hard for me to follow along with what is happening. It was very difficult to understand what I was reading. The prologue was completely confusing to me. I don't know if it was confusing to anybody else, but not just because you don't understand the events of what's going on, but also trying to figure out how to reorient myself with what the second person point of view is describing and how to read it and how to understand what it is saying. So very, very unique. I would love to hear your thoughts, your opinions on the second person point of view. If you like it, if you dislike it, if you don't understand it, whatever else. If it's a turn off, if it's a turn on for you for this book, just let me know, because I'd really love to hear your opinions on this experience, since it is such a unique experience to have in a book to be written with this point of view. So for me, at first, I did get used to it and I did finally figure it out and get more in the rhythm of it after a couple of chapters. But at first, it really threw me off and it made it really hard to figure out what's going on. And that could possibly be a reason for the author's choice to make it a second person point of view. But I also thought of some other reasons, and I'd just like to present them with you as possible theories. Of course, as not being the author, I can never fully know what the author's thinking and what her main motivation is, but sorry about that, folks. Let me get that turned off there. All right. But for possibilities of why this might be, or what it does, but I'm seeing it doing for the text, we can go ahead and have a discussion and think about it in those terms and see what your thoughts are on it, and let me know what you think, if you agree, if you don't agree, all that kind of stuff. I'd love to hear your opinions. So the first possibility that I thought of for why the author chose to do this very rare, very different point of view is because she meaning Harrow is no longer made up of just one person. She is made up of two people. So she cannot be defined by just a regular she pronoun or whatever. Of course, based on the events of this book, it's kind of confusing in exactly if something has actually changed in the history or not, but it seems like Gideon is still the one that is inside her. She just is having altered memories of such. So even though both people inside her are supposed to be a woman or whatever, maybe because there is two people inside her, it is not, the author is trying to portray that this is not just a one person anymore, so is using the second person point of view as a way to define her versus the typical she, he pronouns, by saying you did this, or instead of saying, like a first person point of view, I did this, because there's no longer just a one I, and there's no just one he or she, so instead she's putting it back on you, meaning the person that the author or the narrator is making a note of. So you meaning as if she's talking to Harrow, you, whatever that's defined as, is just you. Again, you is also a one person, definition, but it could be thought of as more of like the narrator, whoever's narrating the story, is thinking about it as in telling Harrow, and can't define her by just a normal means, and so is just saying, okay, you did this, and you did that, as she is speaking directly to her. And that might be the kind of narration that she's coming from, is that the harder point of defining exactly how she is defined now that she is a lector, not wanting to classify her as just a regular she, since there are two souls inside of her, so maybe she went with the you instead. That's one possibility, one idea I came up with possibly why second person might have been used. The second one is that Harrow is distancing herself or unconnected from herself, and the fact that she no longer feels the connection to her body, to her spirit, to her soul. Harrow has this maybe just this weird disconnect from herself, doesn't really view herself as herself anymore because she's got Gideon inside her, or at this point in time she thinks it's Ortus. So she's in a bad state right now, she's in a hard mode, so she's just really distant and disconnected from herself. So she needs somebody to tell her what happened to her. It is in a past tense, not a present tense, I double checked that. So maybe the narrator is explaining to Harrow, this is what you did, because she is so disconnected from herself that she can't even really mentally process what is going on in her own life. So she is having somebody tell her, this narrator is telling her, this is what you did and this is how things happened for you, because she just is so distant and so far removed from the situation that she can't even be the narrator or be connected to the narrator. The narrator instead is speaking directly to Harrow and explaining what the situation is that happened to her. And 3, maybe the narrator is the second person inside of Harrow. Maybe it is Gideon inside Harrow telling the events and mentally refers to Harrow's portion of the soul as you. So maybe I'm kind of thinking like maybe it's Gideon that's the narrator, and she's narrating to Harrow inside of Harrow, if that makes sense, because their two souls are now inside Harrow's body. And it was absorbed by Harrow, but maybe there's still some kind of Gideon left in there. It doesn't have Gideon's personality, so that might be a little iffy. The narrator doesn't really have that kind of personality, but I did think possibly it could be a relation to Gideon telling Harrow her story of what is happening and what she's doing, because Harrow is just kind of on autopilot or something. I don't know, some of them like make sense. I feel like some of them kind of are a little out there, but they were just kind of, as I was reading, what I thought of as I was reading these chapters, trying to figure out why would this be in second person. And these are 3 different possibilities I came up with that maybe I will be more convinced of as I continue reading and as I continue experiencing it in the second person. Maybe I won't be, maybe it'll still be a mystery, maybe it won't be known. But those are some possibilities that I thought of could be the reason for our narrator or our author to make the narrator as a second person point of view. Please let me know your thoughts on this point of view, reading wise, as well as why you think it could be written in the second person. If there's anything in particular you think matches, or if any of the 3 things that I pointed out really hits home for you and you're thinking that seems like likely, or if I didn't explain it very well, please let me know. This concept is kind of hard for me to fully define how I was thinking about it when I was reading, so I did my best, and I think I came across with how I was trying, my thought process was each time. So please let me know. For me, I feel like the one that stands out as being the most reasonable, it's tough to say. Like, each time I thought of something new, I'm like, oh, that seems more reasonable, but at this moment, I'm wondering if maybe it's like she's just so disconnected from herself and her reality, especially since her reality has been changed. Harrow's reality, obviously, she's not the same person that she was before, and she obviously has altered memories of some kind, or the past has been altered somehow, whatever it is. So she's not 100% herself. So part of me wonders if that feels like the most genuine one, is that she's just so out of it and disconnected from herself and what's going on, that maybe the point of view is trying to portray that, is that disconnection between herself and the events around her. But I feel like all 3 of them could have some possibility. Maybe it's a mixture of all 3. I really don't know. I'd just love to hear your opinions on it and to hear your thoughts about it. Okay, now let's talk about the fact that it seems like book 1 has been totally erased from the start of book 2. Gideon has been completely erased so far from book 2. Harrow has a contradictory memory or set of memories that make it seem that Ortis was her cavalier and not Gideon. So Gideon isn't even in Harrow's mind her cavalier. She had Ortis sacrifice himself somehow, and it wasn't in the same manner as the way that Gideon gave herself up. So we don't exactly know how much this has altered the reality of what she experienced in book 1 and becoming a lictor. We don't know the full extent of that, but we do know that she doesn't even know who really is her cavalier and who sacrificed her life for her. Gideon, they have that moment where we've got that time break where it goes back to Harrow as a kid, where it discussed that there was another girl that grew up along beside her, but then at the same time she died before Harrow was born. Like, how does that make any sense? It's a very contradictory statement. So Gideon, even growing up with Harrow, is completely null and void. She has no memory of Gideon at all. None. Just completely erased. And it completely erased every event that happened from book 1 at this point in time, at least with Harrow's memory and how she is interacting with everything. It's like book 1 has not happened, other than the fact that Harrow is a lector. So it's very, very confusing and very interesting. This discrepancy seems to have been done on purpose, by Harrow, based on that letter that she wrote to herself, that this is something that she has made happen. Though it could also be something like that came up with as part of with the Emperor. I don't know if the Emperor had anything to do with this change or not. Obviously, it seems that the Emperor is kind of aware of it. And obviously Anth is aware of it because she was part of that letter. So either the choice was that she either thought of it by herself and did it, or something that the Emperor needed her to do made her make this decision or something. We don't really know. But it does seem like this memory change that Harrow is unaware of is done on purpose and for a particular reason. I don't understand at this point, and I'm sure, we'll be learning more about why this is important as we move forward, but we don't really understand why it is important or necessary for Gideon to be erased from Harrow's memory. We don't understand the importance of that. Obviously, she still has the sword, Gideon's sword, and it is supposed to always be around her. But it is also the reason that, Gideon is having this weakness and this sickness. A lot of it has to do with the sword being around her and seeing the sword. So, very confusing beginning here. Very much that everything seems to just be wiped away from everything that we know from book 1. No longer helps us to move forward with book 2, other than the fact that we know what world we're in and we know Harrow. So I don't know if it'll help us that we know about Gideon and Harrow doesn't. It's very, very interesting. We don't understand the reasoning that stuff is going on. So hopefully as we move forward, that will become more clear. But it definitely makes it hard to start this novel because everything seems like, we have no prior knowledge. We're supposed to know prior things and to know how stuff happened and to have this knowledge that helps us move forward and understand book 2. And instead, all of it just hinders us from understanding what's going on right now. Ortis is who, Harrow remembers being her cavalier, and really Ortis was barely in the book at all, so we don't understand his character much or what motivations that he would have had to be her cavalier and to make her into a lector. Very, like I said, very hard to follow. And it also makes me wonder if we can trust what we are told about Harrow if her memories have been altered, because obviously Gideon was erased. Obviously stuff is not as it should be, but we learned about Harrow's past, which some of it we already knew, but we didn't know about this insanity that Harrow apparently has, where she has the quote body that follows her around, which is the girl that she's in love with that's trapped in that tomb and dead or whatever. Apparently that body follows her around and now is talking to her again, but has been following her around for a while, is constantly there, interacts with her, even though she's also a figment of her imagination. Now the question is can we trust that actually was something that the original Harrow had? Or is this brought on based on whatever Harrow did to herself? Can we really trust anything that Harrow thinks or feels or says, because her past has been so altered, because it used to be so wrapped up in Gideon, that it's been altered so thoroughly that is Harrow even the same person as she was before? Do we really know who Harrow is now at this point? Can we trust that this is the same Harrow that we left from book 1? It's hard to say. So let me know what you think about that. I do find that's an interesting concept, as well as can we really trust anything going on in this story at all? Alright, and now let's go ahead and talk about Harrow herself. We've already talked a little bit about her, based on what's happening with her and her memory loss and all that kind of stuff. But with her altered memories, it does seem like we're having her start at a place where she is rejecting her cavalier's soul. At least that's what it seems like to me. I can't really say, we don't really know what the vomiting is being caused by, but it looks like when she looks at the sword, it keeps saying that the sword is what causes her to start throwing up. So I am assuming that she is having a hard time adjusting to being a lector, and with these altered memories, it's making it so her soul is not meshing correctly with Gideon's. I don't know if she knew that was going to happen. Obviously, the Emperor is not surprised by it. She asked him, does this happen to a lot of your lectors? And he's like, oh, it happens to some of them. Like, very unhelpful answer. Doesn't really explain why it's happening or anything. So I'm assuming that her soul might be rejecting Gideon's now that she no longer has any thoughts about Gideon, or rejecting the thought of being connected to Ortis. It's tough to say. Or is it because of whatever she did to alter her state of mind, or is it none of the above? We'll have to find out. But it does seem very interesting that she is struggling so hard, especially when she first became a lector. It didn't seem like she was going to have any of those problems. Obviously, she was very sad about Gideon being lost and such, but I didn't get this sense that their souls were not going to mesh completely and be a seamless connection there. I don't know, maybe this is also her way of grieving over Gideon now that she doesn't have memories. I don't know. It seems very interesting that it is a lot based on Gideon's two-handed sword that is causing her sickness. So that's what I'm assuming, and that's what it seems like. She's just having a hard time adjusting to being, her body's adjusting to being a lector, for whatever reason it might end up being. Again, based on, feeling like we can't really trust Harrow based on her memory being erased, I feel like we have a new Harrow that we don't know yet, in the fact that these new memories that she has, we don't know what they are. We don't know who she is without Gideon, or the knowledge of Gideon. So we're kind of having to relearn her at this moment. We're relearning her past and how she currently views it. We're relearning who she feels that she is without Gideon. We do have that one moment, I feel like, where we really see the old Harrow and the fact that she was like, okay, I'm part of my own plan. I understand now that there is a reason that this is happening and I'm not lost. And because Harrow doesn't seem like someone who would be lost very easily. So again, I feel like we have kind of a new presentation of who Harrow is at this moment. So we're gonna have to learn her again, gonna have to understand where she's at this point with her new memories. Based on the note, it does seem like the old Harrow can be restored, even though she says not to do that. So I find that that's very interesting, is that the Harrow that knew Gideon and had the whole book one experience that had Gideon growing up can be restored, but she doesn't want that to ever be the case for whatever reason. So that's also another interesting aspect to Harrow, is that there is kind of two sides to her, and that altering her memory has clearly made a change for herself, and that's why she's saying, do not undo what I have done. That is, absolute, do not try and fix this and be what you were before. Just keep moving forward as you are now in this new person with these new memories. Though Harrow doesn't understand that the change was new memories at this point. And it's very interesting that she feels more grounded, that she is part of her own crazy plan, that she is part of her own goals or whatever she thinks is going to happen based on this change. So she's finally finding more of her footing, finally feeling a bit more herself, because she understands that she has a reason that she has put herself in this position and made herself feel so lost and so unherself. So Harrow is going to be somebody we're going to have to learn all over again, someone we're going to have to grow with again, someone that we're going to have to see who she is now at this point, which I find is very interesting, is that not only did we lose our main character from the last season, we are now having to relearn what we already knew about the person we're moving forward with. So definitely think that the author is really amazing in how she presents her story and how she structures it and all that. There's always so much complexity to the story that you don't understand, and that she really reveals seamlessly and effortlessly, and you don't even know you don't know things until you find them out. And the whole beginning of this one really makes me, I was really concerned about not having Gideon as the main character, but now this beginning really intrigues me and makes me want to understand what is going on and really hooks me into this story, even though we don't have Gideon at this point. And even with the weird second person point of view, the events and trying to figure out what's going on, it hooks me enough to want to continue reading and figuring out what exactly is going on and why things are the way they are. And let's go ahead and talk about the nitty gritty really quick. I've got two nitty gritty points to just keep in mind since we are moving forward. The first one is about the letter that mentions, if this happens or whatever, give to Camilla. Well, Camilla was missing at the end of book 1. I even double checked to make sure I wasn't crazy, but Camilla, they weren't sure at first if she was alive or not, and then she was missing, along with Gideon and a couple other bodies that they were just missing. Not that they were dead, but completely gone, unfindable. So apparently something has happened where now they know where Camilla is and what's happened to her. So that's another marker that some time has passed, is that Camilla before was presumed missing and not knowing what happened to her and the few other bodies and or people. And now she says to give it to Camilla. So did they find Camilla? What happened? Did they find then Gideon's body? What's going on with that? We're going to hopefully find out. Maybe we'll see Camilla, maybe we won't. How Harrow's supposed to know where Camilla is? That's another question as well. But lots of layers to go along with that. And then second is that I thought was very interesting is that Ianthe was very protective of her sister, which is surprising because it seemed like Ianthe had no sense of loving her sister at all, just feeling like she was a waste of space and in her way, the way that she treated her beforehand. And again, I believe she was also one of the missing people, but it sounds like she might still be missing. But the thought that she could be dead made her completely angry. Completely angry that Harrow would even suggest that. So where is she? If we found Camilla, but we haven't found Ianthe's sister, and why, if she loved Coronabeth so much, why did she treat her so terribly? Like, what is that angle, and why is that dynamic the way it is? It's very confusing, makes everything kind of up in the air at this point. So yeah, I just thought I'd present those two things for you guys to see, as to keep that in mind as we move forward, and maybe we'll find out some answers, maybe we won't. We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, let me know down below or anywhere else that you'd like what your thoughts are at the beginning of this book. This book definitely started off all over the place with a lot to talk about, so hopefully I explained everything good, all my thoughts and everything came out clearly. If down below is not the best place for you, you can also reach me at Twitter, which is at fantasyfiction1. You can also reach me on Facebook, which is /fantasyfiction1. You can also contact me and other of your fellow fanatics on our Discord. The link will be down below if you'd like to join. We've got several people over there. We are getting really good on our numbers over there, people in the server talking, and we would love to have a discussion with you on Gideon the Ninth, as well as Harrow the Ninth, now that we're starting that. So if you want to talk about how crazy this book is starting, we'd be happy to talk about it with you over there with your other fellow fanatics. If you want more content from me, if you want different kind of content, there is the blog of fantasyfictionfanatics.net, which you can find the trivia question at, as well as book reviews, book recommendations, different times of me talking about different things I think about fantasy and reading in general, terminology stuff, all kinds of things that deal with fantasy and reading over there. If you want more different kinds of content from me, hopefully you'll check it out and enjoy it. You can always tell me what you'd like to see either on this channel or on my blog. I'd love to hear from you. And I think that is it. So I guess I will see you guys in the next one, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.